Good morning. Thank you for being with CFI this first week of June. I know that time flies when I'm seeing Dr. Food once a month, and all of a sudden it seems like it was yesterday I spoke to you, which it also was. I'm Nikki French. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Food Integrity. I encourage you to go to our website at foodintegrity.org for all of our member benefits, as well as some of our new strategic solutions that we've launched and information on our upcoming summit in October. So part of what we do at CFI is bring together experts to tell us what's happening outside of the US. And our favorite is Dr. David Hughes, also known as Dr. Food. He brings decades of experience sharing insights for the entire food chain, not just from the UK either. He's constantly on the road, and I think we've caught him in between two trips to Australia and other countries with global headlines to share. So welcome again, David.
Great. It's always a pleasure for me. And yeah, I'm just back from Oz, as we say, from Aussie, from Australia. And then I dropped off in Thailand and Cambodia to look at some agribusinesses. What intrigued me, the big headline in Australia when I was there, the agri-food talk, if you will, is that China is lifting their ban on Aussie beef exports. Well, you might ask, why would they ban Australian beef? Well, the backstory is in 2020, so right at the beginning of the pandemic, the Australian Prime Minister then asked some very pointed questions about COVID's origin in Wuhan. And the Chinese, particularly President Xi, got very mad and punished Australia, essentially by banning imports from Australia into China of barley, wine, lobster, and beef. And, wine exports, for example, were a big deal. They dropped from 1 billion to zero in a matter of months. Well, now Australia is a new prime minister, and he's much more accommodating for good reason. So the bans are slowly being removed. It's key for the country because China takes, not far off 50% of Australia's total exports. That's agri-food stuff plus energy and all sorts of other things. So it's a salutary reminder for me that China can make and break you when it comes to trade matters and maybe to other matters too.
Yeah, it's certainly a tightrope to walk with China.
Mm-hmm.
So just a reminder to our viewers this morning, we are live. So we encourage questions in the chat. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll leave some time at the end to answer them if we have some questions. So our first topic is around CFI's favorite topic, which is trust in food and what consumers are saying. And David has some findings from the latest EU EIT trust report. Say that 3 times fast. Share with us some of the learnings that have come out of that report.
Right. Yeah, as you said, EIT Trust Report 2023. So it's just been published. It's an annual European measure of trust in our food system. And it's a big survey, like 20,000 plus people. What are the key findings? Just picking some of them up. The level of trust in EU food and the food system remains pretty consistent. But there was a big and perhaps surprising decline in intention to live sustainably. Especially among younger consumers, not least males, and those who are less educated and those from rural areas. And I think that sort of reflects that there's been so much sustainability talk and it confuses them. Younger consumers, I'm sorry, EU consumers in general, when it comes to food innovation, are not that enthusiastic. And that hasn't changed for some time. And people worry that new foods are industrial or unnatural. I think there's a ultra-processed food element coming out in that too. Younger consumers, in positive, are 2 times more open to innovation than the older ones, but they're the consumers with the least healthy and least sustainable diets. Actually, consumers are confident in European food with regard to its taste. Why? Because they can taste it. But they're much less confident in industry claims about sustainability, health, and authenticity of products. and they worry that they must rely on third-party promises, which could be greenwashing or health washing and the like. Perhaps not surprising, I think I've mentioned before, farmers are the most trusted in the food system year after year. And authorities, that is, the regulators, often government regulators, are the least trusted, sometimes unfairly. But farmers aren't trusted equally right across the park. Big livestock producers are seen as the bad guys, and small crop organic farmers as the angels. And I think actually that's a bit worrisome, as it's a sort of idyllic view of food production. I mean, the little guys are great, of course, but they can't produce the amount of food we want and at the cost that we want it. So, I encourage you, have a look at the report, and I'm sure CFI will give you the link if you require it.
We'll certainly do so. We'll certainly do so. Thank you. It's really interesting trends and things that we're seeing similar on this side of the pond. So we've got a copy of that study that we'll make available to everyone through our website in our research area. So our second topic relates to a now annual event, this being the UK Farm to Fork Summit that takes place at number 10 Dowling Street, which brings together government and food industry leaders to discuss some of the key challenges. So tell us what was happening at those boardroom tables.
Right. So that was our second annual summit. It happens in May. It's an open meeting. It's a sort of big deal. It's our prime minister, our president, if you will, plus all his senior officials and the leaders of business from the food industry. And what were the key things they talked about? I'd be interested to know if it's a big issue in the US. In the UK, we're spooked by lack of availability of products through the pandemic and the impact of climate change on supply availability. It's a big deal in the UK as we're only 60%, 60% self-sufficient in food. We're huge importers. And in the past, actually, government and the private sector have been pretty relaxed, laissez-faire, if you will, about this. Look, if we're short, we're lucky enough, we've got some income, we can always buy it on the global market. But recent crises have really engendered a much more cautious approach on securing food for our citizens. And a big element in this farm to fork meeting is that the government has established a food security index, which they measure each year. And it's a key tool for the government in measuring food availability. And so what does it include? Well, there's certain elements. I won't go on, but first, we provide an estimate of global food supply for human consumption in this year. So looking around the world and say, are there any crises and will they have an impact on availability in our own country? Secondly, we look at production to supply ratio in the UK, so our own self-sufficiency. And we're extremely low in some areas. For example, if we take fresh fruit, and we should eat more of it, but we only produce 15% of our own fresh fruit. We import 85%. And it's been a bit thin on the ground in Europe because of very hot climate. And almost half our veggies are imported too. And so government's saying, is this important? Should we do something about it? We also measure ag total productivity. So, how are our producers are they efficient in converting inputs into outputs? And this too, looking at the agricultural land use, how many acres have we got in production? We're only a small island, for goodness sake. And is the amount of land in ag production going down or up? Well, it's certainly not going up as we build more houses. So, should we be worried about it? And then towards the end, we also track energy and fertilizer prices, particularly if we think back, it's been the same in the US the last 2 years. There's been some astonishing spikes in these, which have an awful big impact on the food industry. And then finally, it's in terms of the Food Security Index, we look at biosecurity risks. In the UK, just as in the US, avian influenza, for example, is a bit of a deal. And it's sort of worrisome that it seems to be spreading a little into the dairy industry, for example. So, so this is an annual thing and we look forward to it.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree. There's a bit of a lingering spotlight from the pandemic of the importance of this food security, what we'll find on the shelves, et cetera. on this side as well. So our third topic today goes from the meeting room to the soggy fields of the UK as farmers consider their best course of action in this tough, wet year on your side of the pond. So tell us a little bit more about what's
Yes.
happening with all your rain that we keep hearing about.
Yeah. No, we're still getting it. It's the wettest year since 1836, for goodness sake. And just to remind that, post Brexit, when we exited the European Union, uh, government changed the agricultural support system, and they want to support farmers instead of just giving them money, giving them a check as they get in the EU. Farmers get money for doing positive environmental things, for being the social good. I mean, the mantra is public money for public goods, such as will pay farmers if they can help improve air and water quality, improve access to the countryside for consumers, measures to reduce flooding, etc. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that farmers were reluctant to take the green money because they preferred to actually just produce food. They don't like the idea of just getting paid to grow trees. And also, there are too many forms to fill in for this. It is very bureaucratic. There's like a 200 plus page survey, no, not survey, form, the form document thing you've got to fill in, and farmers say enough is enough. However, given the year, because they're having real difficulty putting their crops in because their seeds were being washed or it was just too wet to get on the fields, farmers have been taking the green money while it's on offer since the weather's so bad. Because they can't get their crops in. So we're having greener ag, if you will, for the wrong reasons because of the bad weather. But I mean, what intrigues me is there'll be a noticeable cutback in food production this year, and we'll see that in terms of food supplies next year. I don't think we're going to starve, for God's sake, but it's intriguing.
Yeah, interesting. David, I'm going to jump to a question that we have before we finish off with our tidbits here in the chat. The question is, what are some of the next issues that the next generation of consumers are concerned with beyond what you mentioned? So are they concerned with animal care, antibiotic use? What more specific water or other sustainable issues? I think we've covered sort of, the fact that taste sometimes comes first and living sustainability isn't
Yeah,
top of
yeah.
mind. Traceability back to the farm, those types of things. What are some specifics on this next generation of?
I mean, what's clouding things, Mickey, is that they're struggling still with income, and
Yeah.
that yes, the inflationary burst is over, but still, if you many young people like to live in big cities, and it's extraordinarily expensive in their terms to live there. It's just can they afford the rent? And I think that explains why they've sort of backed off in terms of sustainability on organic purchases, etc. But I tell you that this will come again. That if I look at improved planetary health and improved even personal health, there's a big push coming from younger people, and that will have an impact on our industry without a doubt. It's just taking time to come through, but it will come through.
Yeah, I know when I was over in your part of the world, Marks and Spencer was running a real traceability program where right on the pork chop there was a QR code and you could watch
Yeah,
a video about how they really understood exactly where that particular pork chop came from, which farm, etc. So,
yeah, yeah.
and that's performing incredibly well. So,
Yeah, well,
um,
actually, a lot some the better supermarkets, the more premium ones, take great pride in that. I mean, what proportion of people actually are inclined to check is another matter, but I don't think they have to. It's just it gives you sort of confidence that if they have trust in their retailer, and we tend to trust retailers, then it gives you a warm feeling.
yeah, yep, exactly. So we have a couple of moments um, and quick tidbits to share about an upcoming election on an auspicious day and an anniversary. So tell us what you're up to over there for the rest of the
Right,
summer.
right. Well, for you've got a big presidential election coming up. Well, the UK national election day is on. Wait for it, July the 4th. And I think that's sort of marvelously ironic. It's 248 years since you booted us out. And I hope you have a good day on July the 4th, and I hope we will. It looks absolutely certain that the current Conservative government will get booted out by an incoming Labour government who will tend to be more leftward leaning, not hugely left, but left leaning anyway. The Conservatives have been in power for 14 years, and frankly, they're out of ideas and enthusiasm. But I think the food industry take from this is significant. That I was just listening to an interview with the incoming health czar. So that's the Minister of State for Health, the one that will be in the new government. And he had singled out big food, and particularly big breakfast cereal producers, the Kellogg's of this world and the Nestle's. And he said that when he's in office, quote, and he will be in office, he will steamroll a highly unhealthy food producers. And they better get on board his steamroller or they'll get run over. And I think that's in general that we're getting ready, because Labour government will have a much, much more interventionist approach. And so there's apprehension in the food industry. Actually, the Conservative government said they were going to do important things on obesity and sustainability, etc., and then backed off because of the economic crisis. But I think Labour will be straight into this. It'll be felt right across the food industry.
Yeah. Okay. And there is you have an anniversary coming up for the RSPCA.
Yes, the Royal Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and it's their 200th anniversary this month. It was formed 200 years ago in a London coffee shop. It was largely focused then on helping out poor horses that were being flogged, because remember then, 200 years ago, horsepower was actual horses, not horsepower in cars. Have we made great progress in terms of treatment of animals over the last 200 years? Well, yes, some, but, if I look around the world, there's still bullfighting, for goodness sake, in Spain. Indeed, there is in Mexico. And I think it might have been banned in Colombia. That's by the by. And I mean, at a lesser level, remember, I've just been in Australia, that last year, 1.26 million live cattle and sheep were exported from Australia to the Middle East, Vietnam, and Indonesia. And I point out, actually, it's the Middle East where all the sheep go, live sheep go, in great big, they're huge boats, just packed with thousands of sheep. And going to the Middle East has become chaotic because of the Houthi terrorists in the Red Sea, leaving the ships who had to turn back, and then we're just sort of floating in the middle of the ocean, going round and round with thousands of sheep, which is far from animal welfare friendly. And for my mind, I don't know how much longer the world will allow us to export live animals over weeks on the sea. It's very far from being sustainable, but it's a big issue in Australia. There are businesses that have been doing this for years, and they're reluctant to give it up.
Agree. So we're a couple minutes over time, so I just want to thank everyone for joining us as we connect the dots on the food chain and across the pond with Dr. Food. Just a reminder, the first Thursday of next month is July 4th, when you in the UK will be at the polls and we will be at our grills. So join us again on July 11th for our next webcast. And thank you for participating in one of our fabulous programming. David, we'll see you in July. Thank you, as always. Looking
forward to it. I hope the weather improves here, and do have a good summer in the meantime.
I do. Thank you. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.